it's us at Fisken's, but
Yes.
I think that what I would say is, everything's about teamwork, and the group of cars that are here today is really courtesy of an awful lot of hard work and an awful lot of good spirit and faith by the owners themselves and by the team that we've got on the selection committee, and we're very lucky in that James Brooks Ward and the Royal Concourse of Elegance very much empower us to use our judgment to come up with crazy ideas, themes, in the Formula One theme, the Ford versus Ferrari theme, and when you come up with the right theme, people either buy into it or they don't, and people have really bought into it. This collection actually represents, in some respects, a better collection than we started off with back at the start of this year. The start of this year, we already had more or less, there was huge enthusiasm for people to come. But of course, one by one they fell. With quarantine and restrictions, we lost cars. But it's funny how sometimes plans just evolve better than your dreams. And in the last few weeks, the themes brought in, the lineup of our Formula One cars, the Ford versus Ferraris. I mean, through our friend Joe Macari, to getting the Ferrari 250 GTO at its first public debut. Wow, I didn't expect that. And thanks to Joe and to the owner of the car, the 365P again. Came through, the same Ferrari Classica restoration, and the Fords, to have the Ford France GT40 from the movie, the Claude Lelouch movie on Homme est une femme. That car's never been shown in the UK before. So, I mean, these are just a few of the kind of jewels in a crown, which is, any one of these cars here, and I love the fact that this event, whilst it's about serious cars, I don't think we take this thing too seriously. And when I look over and we've got the first ever production Land Rover, wow. I mean, everyone can relate to having a Landy. And my son today is out in his Porsche 936 Junior car. So we've got the kids' car class. So we've got all that going on. And it's just, I mean, I've been, there's many things, I'm a Scotsman, so I don't get very emotional, but, I am so happy to see people, to see enthusiasts, and we're all here, and we haven't done anything since March, and to get all you lot here is just bloody fantastic, and we all share this passion, and the weather's been great, and Hampton Court is amazing, and thanks to the NHS for getting us through this shitstorm we've all been in. But it's been brilliant, and I've got a feeling that in many respects, the faith that James Brooks Ward and the guys put into this event, and our sponsors at Lang & Song, everyone could have walked away, but everyone just said, we're going to make it happen, we're going to make it happen, and we have made it happen, and we're it's just magic, and it's great to be back.
Oh, no, it's wonderful. And I've been struggling with this for the last 2 days since I've been here. But do you have a favourite? Is there one car that I mean, obviously the GTO, which I love Joe. He's a good friend of mine, so I was allowed to sit in it yesterday, which is just like such a highlight. So that's my favourite. But what's yours?
There can be no one favourite. There can be. It's like your children. It's like, do you love anyone more than the other?
Yes.
Yeah. Someone said yes. Depends on who's behaving.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I think my favourite is Jean-Francois Decaux's Ferrari stack pipe Formula One car over there. I think I find myself, I keep on coming back and having a little sneaky look at it. But, I've seen other things, today, which just, it's not all about the red or the Exotica. There are so many great cars. I mean, I'm loving the future classics over there. I think Aston Martin's Victor wow, I wasn't expecting that to come. And yeah, it's really cool. And you know, Aston have made wonderful bespoke suits in the past, which you just know they look cool, but you just know they're going to be probably better in the looking than the actual driving. But you know, Aston are doing a great car today, and I have to say the DBX. I'm so proud. You know, Aston have had a bumpy ride recently, but that DBX, I think it's going to sell like hotcakes. And I've seen that over there, and I love that we can have, the stuff that's coming in the pipeline, along with the stuff that that we're looking back and celebrating. So, again, it's a long-winded answer to say I think the Ferrari is the one for me. The Formula One car over there with all those amazing white pipes. They call them spaghetti pipes because they look like bunches. The one just number 2 over there. It looks like a bunch of exhaust pipe spaghetti and all those trumpets and things. And I could just see Bandini or any of the great Chris Amon or someone just stepping into that and going. So and the 250F as well. But here I am. I'm going off piste because, like children, I'm just adoring them all.
I know. I'm so with you. But before we go into more about you and your business, can you tell us a little bit more about the steering committee at the concourse and what that's all about?
Yeah, the steering committee has always evolved. When the first event was held at Windsor Castle, James Brooks Ward identified that they needed to get some really good collectors and people who had some influence in. And we're a mixed group of, in my case, specialist dealers, journalists, historians. We have the chairman of the Royal Automobile Club Motoring Committee. We've got the gorgeous CC Muldoon, who is she was here.
Yes, she did one of our podcasts.
Exactly. So we've got the lovely CC, who is is just an encyclopedia of cars, because we want I think the good thing of a committee is you need everyone's opinion. But we all love great cars, and we've all got our little niches and our things we're interested in. So, it's a fantastic process, and we just sit around the table and we come up with our wish list, and everyone goes, well, wouldn't it be great to see him, or wouldn't it be great to see that car? Who knows them? Right, over to you, you get on the job, and we sort of spread it out, and then we get, we use all our powers of persuasion to bring the owners and the cars that we'd like to see here.
So you've been selling racing historic cars for decades now. Can you tell us how you got into the business at the beginning?
Yeah, I'm a failed schoolboy, in that I got into a spot of bother at boarding school and ended up unexpectedly home. And my mum and dad loved cars, and they always had lovely old cars. And we were all at home, and I was in the doghouse, and a wonderful old man called Bunty Scott Moncrief, who was a famous purveyor. He was a purveyor of horseless carriages to the nobility and gentry, and he'd done that since 1927. And he had a restoration shop, and I was fascinated by all things mechanical. And he said, "Send them down to me. I'll look after him." And so I got to work restoring old Rollses and Bentleys and Bugattis and Alphas as a 16-year-old, and that was my university of life. And the plan was always that I would go back to Scotland and do something rather more mundane. But I went down to London. I went round banging on the doors of all sorts of people, and then I eventually got a job in an auction house. And again, I keep on expecting the knock on the door from my mum and dad saying it's time to come home to Scotland. But I managed to find a career in something that was a hobby and a passion. And one fine day I'm going to get a proper job, but not today.
So your wonderful showroom, Fisken's, is based in South Kensington. So why did you choose South Ken?
Well, South Kensington, back in the time when horses and carts got pushed out of the mews. The mews are these lovely little garages. They're tucked away in the little streets behind the big houses in central London. And from the sort of earliest time, from the 1920s and 30s, from my mentor Bunty Scott Moncrief, they used these mews garages to sell exotic cars. And it's a long tradition, and back in the sort of 1980s when I came to London, all the great dealers occupied places in the Mews, and my friend Dan Margulis used to run his Grand Prix Maseratis. Our friend Alain de Cadney is still in our Mews. He launched his campaign to Le Mans from Queensgate Place Mews. The cars were built there in these cobbled streets. And we're one of the last survivors, myself and my friend Peter Bradfield and a few others. We're still in the Mews, and we uphold what's now a long tradition of selling great cars from these little cobbled streets of London.
Amazing. So you've had the most extraordinary list of cars going through your showroom. Is there been one particular story or one find that you've sold that you particularly remember?
Yes, it's with the benefit of time you can talk about some of this stuff, because of course we've had some adventures. I think probably the most exciting car, which probably is one of the few that will never be repeated, is we managed to sell many years ago one of the famous Grand Prix Auto Unions. And the Grand Prix Auto Unions were these these fabled cars that were built to race against Mercedes in the 1930s, and they dominated everything. They were the first rear-engine Grand Prix car, and after World War II, they all disappeared. They were either lost in the war, but the Russians took a couple of them back to Russia, and an extraordinary character who I befriended managed to smuggle a Grand Prix Auto Union out of the Soviet Union in a camper van through Finland. And I met this character. He'd emigrated to America, and he would speak to no one, but using many skills of persuasion and guile, I befriended him, and I was able to buy the only Grand Prix Auto Union in private ownership, not owned by Audi, and I sold it to a client of mine. And I have to say, when the car came to Queensgate Place Mews, it's still surreal even thinking and talking about it today. But like in the tradition of the Mews, whilst we've never been completely popular with our neighbours, we fired it up, and I didn't even bother putting trade plates on it, but I drove a Grand Prix Auto Union up to Hyde Park and back, which was a special moment.
How incredible. I'm going to have a look at a picture of that. So what was your first classic? Do you remember that?
Well, the very first classic car I ever raced, Bunty gave me. He has a Vauxhall 3098 racing car, and it raced at Brooklands in the 1930s. And I used to drive Bunty in his 70s, and he had quarter vision in one eye. He was diabetic, and he had both legs and calipers. But the Vintage Sports Car Club were very all-embracing, and he used to be allowed to race. He was absolutely lethal, and everyone stayed out his way. And one day he said, "Dear boy," he said, "you should have a go." And I was 17, and I just got my license, and I did my first Vintage Sports Car Club race in that car, and I had a few years of fun with it. And when he passed away, he left it to me, and I still have that car today. So that's my first ever racing car, and I've still got it, and I still use it, I still drive it, and my kids are only 6 and a bit, but I suspect that even before they've got a license, they'll be driving it too.
Amazing. So may I ask what's in your collection?
It's always ever evolving. We've got the Vauxhall. We've got a short-nosed Jaguar D-Type, which is a lovely, lovely car. For family purposes, we've got a Bentley 4.5-litre Sports Saloon. And I'm a little bit of I'm a terrible one for souvenirs, and I was like yourself. I was able to do a little bit of modern car racing, and I raced at Le Mans a few times in 2004, 5, 6, and 7. And my last Le Mans, never say never. There might not be another one, but I was lucky enough to drive for the French Aston Martin team, Labra, and we ran a factory Aston Martin DBR9. And we had a difficult Le Mans that year, but we finished. All 6 works Astons finished, which was a hell of an achievement. And I kept the car. We did our last race at Interlagos in Brazil, and we went very much as a gentleman team against, and the Works Corvette sent their team because they wanted to win the championship, but they had a gearbox problem, which was bad for them but good for us. And we had a good run, and we won the GT1 class, and I was able to buy the car at the end of the season, and I've kept it. and we ran it at Goodwood this year. And my good Scottish pal Dario Franchitti drove it, and we're cooking up a plan. He's retired, but these things you can now use in historic racing. So if we can have Le Mans Classic next year, they're going to have a race for more contemporary old Le Mans cars, and it'd be nice to take the car back. And Dario fancies a go, so it'll be an all Scots lineup.
Fantastic. So you know the market really, really well. So where do you see things going? There are some really valuable cars here today, but where will the growth come from in the future?
A very good question. I mean, obviously we're going through strange times. Though I'd like to think, looking around today, we're perhaps on the way out of the worst of these strange times. I'm a great one for quality. And my view has been, we have a situation now where there's a little bit more choice in the market. The last few years, the prices have been spiraling ever upwards, and if you didn't grab the one that came along, you missed out. Now we're back to there's a little bit more choice, and if I looked last night at the auction sales, our friends Gooding had, they got 3 world record prices. For the Bugatti Type 59, quite rightly, they got the thick end of 10 million quid. For the Lamborghini Miura, which shows a generational change, when I first came in the old car trade, Lamborghini Miuras were to be avoided. If they wouldn't start. When they started, they generally caught fire.
Exactly.
The clutches were sort of something like you'd have on a London bus, and the driving position was made for very small Italian men with short legs.
But it is beautiful.
But they're very sexy, and like a lot of Italian things, which are a little bit fickle, you forgive them all their sins. Last night, that beautiful Miura made over £3 million.
Wow.
And that Miura was one that was considered to be an exceptionally good car, and it was an exceptionally good car, and it was ferociously fought over. So whether it be a Lamborghini Miura or an amazing Bugatti or a Jaguar E-Type or a Austin Healey, the best of the best. And I think there's an opportunity today to buy cars which people have spent lots of money on them, and to buy beautifully restored cars and have a little bit of choice. So that's today. Your question was, where is the market going? I haven't got a crystal ball, but when I look around here now, I see the love for these cars is undiminished. I think that the events are a big driving force. If we can't have the events, the cars are lovely, but cars are so much more than just objects. They live, they speak. You can drive them, you can hear them, you can sit in history. If you can't use them and you can't go to places, no good. So with the events coming back, I think this thing is going to get even stronger. But again, I love the fact we've got a little bit more choice, and I think that people there's so much information. There's so many specialists like myself. There's so many great restorers. There's so much. We're so lucky. No one should make a mistake buying a classic car. They should just go to the right people, because the advice and the help and the support is there. And we're damn lucky in Great Britain, and we love our animals and we love our classic cars, and we really have got all the facilities, and thank God we've still got the roads to enjoy them.
And if you do it correctly, they're also, really good investment, aren't they? If you go to specialists like yourself, it's almost like buying a house or something. The value will last, if not go up.
Well, when I say return on investment, I think the first return on investment, and someone says to me, what classic car should I buy? And I always say, you shouldn't buy what you're told to buy. You should buy what your eyes go to, and you look and you go, I love that. Then your first return is pleasure. That's the first thing. Don't just keep it at home. Get it out, use it. Get everyone involved with it, join the clubs, go on the tours. That is your first return as an investment. And if you buy the best, you'll be pleasantly surprised when you come to see it, because it's amazing how when people come to me and they go, my God, Gregor, that's a lot of money, and I go, do you know it's a lot of money, but I look back at some of the cars I bought, and on the day I sweated and I thought, you are mad to pay this price, and I look back and I go, oh my God, that was nothing. That was nothing. Because the one thing they're still doing is, God bless the governments, they are printing money, and all that money, in real terms, money, the value of money is just, if you look at prices of houses 30 years ago or 40 years ago, I remember in the 1980s, £1 million, still a lot of money today, but £1 million was an extraordinary amount of money in 1989. And now you look at £1 million, and it's still an awful lot of money, but the value of money goes down, and I think the cars do go up in price, but I think the value of cash goes down, and I think there's only so many beautiful things, and there's only so much great art, and you know what? If you look at the art market compared to the car market, there are so few great cars. The artists have been prolific since the dawn of time, but these cars that we love, which are almost made by the hand of God, there's not that much stuff to go around.
True. So, being a very successful racing car driver, explain to people that might not have, might not have raced, but what is it about racing historic cars?
Well, it's a legal drug, fortunately. It's one of those things. It's very hard to put into words, but when you do it, you'll know. Because what will happen is, and I had a friend of mine who just got his competition license a few weeks ago, and it's really funny. We took him on a track day, and he said he woke up the following day, and the first thing he woke up thinking was, wow, how can I go quicker? which is it. It's something that as you know, Jodie, never leaves you, and it's just, it doesn't matter how much or how little you've done, it's just such a pleasure. And the cars themselves, and actually funny enough, it's not just about the lap time. There's something about old cars, they are so sensory, they're so responsive, and when you're driving them well, and that's why I love. It's interesting, guys like Gordon Murray who are doing their supercars, they're putting gear levers back in. They're putting a clutch in. They're not having, and it's that feel. And you know what it's like when you do that lovely downshift and you give it that little blip, and you hear the engine, and you brake and you turn in the corner and it just moves a little bit, and you come out the corner and you go, wow, that was great. I could go a little faster next time.
Oh gosh, it's been a long time. The last race I did was the Leola Media, so I've got to get back out next year. Maybe we could do something together.
I think we should hatch a plan.
I think we should.
We should hatch a plan, because it's, as you've done on the Mille Miglia, when you're driving these cars on the road, and you're going into these Italian villages and you're in some amazing cool car with the exhaust reverberating off the streets. Yeah. In some countries they throw stones at you, but in Italy they shout and they cheer, and they egg you to go faster, and the kids they want you to dip the clutch, rev the engine up, and they just love it. You're God for 3 days on that event.
It really is very, very special. So, do you have an all-time favourite racing car driver?
Do I have an all-time favourite racing driver? I'd say in the past tense.
Yes.
I revere Jim Clark.
Yes.
I think Jim Clark was. I would concede Fangio is probably the greatest driver of all time, but I think Jim Clark would have continued his career even further. And I think Jim Clark, you could put him in anything. He was just the most beautiful driver. But I think my current hero is Dario Franchitti, and I'm privileged to count him as a friend. I just think, wow. And of the current crop of Grand Prix drivers, I'm a huge Lewis Hamilton fan, and I just don't know why Lewis doesn't get more recognition. What he is doing on the track Yes, he's in the best car, but my God, that boy delivers every time.
Absolutely, and works hard.
Absolutely delivers every time. I love what Alonso can do in a car.
true.
You know, give him anything. But then I look at the other guys, what Lando Norris is doing, George Russell's doing. You know, in this country we've got immense talent, and to be quite honest, you know, every one of those boys on the Formula One grid have got God-given talent. Every one of the guys who are driving in the WEC or driving sports cars, you know, we've got some amazing people out there.
Yeah, no, we're very, very lucky. So, difficult question. If you could go back in time and drive in any race, in any vehicle, which race would you choose and which car?
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, safety net for me, it's got to be at Le Mans. Got to be at Le Mans. Yeah, it's the greatest race in the world. 24 Hours of Le Mans. Which edition of the 24 Hours of Le Mans would I go in? I think I'd get a short list. Definitely the 1920s, one of the great Bentley wins. I think for me, I'd probably pick a race where I wouldn't have finished. I think I would like to have been Tim Burton driving the 4.5 litre Bentley supercharged against Rudolf Caracciola, and Burton was sent out in the Bentley to break the Mercedes. And there's a very famous Brian de Grino picture of Burton. In those days the tyres were rubbish, and when you drove them hard they had lots of tyre blowouts. And Burton passed Caracciola at 125 miles an hour on the Mulsanne straight, and his Caracciola was trying to block him, and he took to the grass to get by him, and of course his tyre blew out, and eventually his car went. But that kind of heroic death or glory, I think, to me, to be at Le Mans in the 1920s, you know, would have been amazing. But you know, we have here today, we've got the Le Mans winning 917 Porsche, and you know, if I look at what our friend Dickie Atwood did in that 917, you know, the smallest spec car, the worst weather, with mumps. He wasn't feeling well. He had mumps at the time. He didn't know that till after the race. Well, they said he couldn't understand why he was just so tired. And they won the 24 Hours of Le Mans. We have that car over there. That would have been amazing to have been Dickie's teammate at Le Mans. Any of the great Le Mans wins, and you know, there have been so many. So I think, but on balance, I think, you know, I'm going to go back to the 1920s. I'm going to get my polka dot scarf on, and I'm going to be Tim Burton.
Love it. Okay, so last question. What does the future hold for Fiskens?
Really good question. I think the future for Fiskens is we're going to stay in London, we're going to stay in that muse, and we're going to stay in that muse. I mean, London is going to come back. We're going to have a place in the countryside as well. Yeah, I think we definitely want to have somewhere around in the home counties, Hampshire, Gloucestershire. Anyone knows a farm for sale in Oxfordshire, let me know. We'd like to have a place outside of London as well, because London, you know, with pollution, with stuff like that, it's getting harder to really show the cars off. But we want to keep that place, and we love people to come and see us in the Mews. So that's where we're going to be. I think we're going to stick to what we know. We're going to stick to the greatest cars in the world. We're going to stick to really selling the good stuff. And we're getting excited because there's going to be more good stuff. We want to get the generation of cars which I raced at Le Mans, the DBR9s, the MC12 Maseratis that you raced, all that cool stuff. You know, we're going to have the 550 Maranellos, we already do. We're going to have some of the younger generation of cars, but we're still going to have fabulous Bugattis, fabulous Alphas, because we need younger people to get turned on to that stuff. And, you know, when you hear a Bugatti Type 35C fired up, you know, it's just like, boom, boom. And I think, you know, what I see with some of the collectors we deal with, they want to have something from every generation. They want to have a car to do the London to Brighton. They want to have a Grand Prix Bugatti. They want a vintage Bentley. They want a Jaguar C-Type to do the Mille Miglia. You know, the events are going to continue, and I think the future is great. And it's just all about getting the next generation of collectors in and turning them on to the good stuff.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. So I'm not quite sure if you've been briefed about our one piece at a time segment. Have you been told about this?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, so basically in this podcast series we're running a special theme called One Piece at a Time, where we ask our guests to select one prized possession that means a lot to them. And so what would your one piece? I mean, we've had everything from Richard Noble, I think, chose a boat. We had Frank Stevenson, who basically pulled out a Bic biro, and that's where he's designed all of the cars, from the gorgeous McLarens over there to the Minis with a Bic biro. So what would your one piece at a time be?
Beyond family, beyond my wife and my twins, which would always come first before everything, I think my one piece is a building, and it's number 14 Queensgate Place, Mews. It's where we've been for the last 27 years, and it's sort of part of us. It's part of our DNA. It's where we've always been, and I can't imagine being without it.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much to be here, and thank you so much for being part of making us all come out to this wonderful event, Hampton Court in the sunshine with these cars. What a wonderful special event. Thank you so much, and thank you to speaking to me. It's wonderful being part of our podcast.
Jodie, I could speak to you all day. It's been a pleasure.
Listen, honestly.
And are we going to go racing?
We're going to go racing.
There you go. That's a deal.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, everyone. That's the end of our podcast. And I just want to say, have a wonderful day in the sunshine. Look at the cars. It's just everywhere you look is something incredible. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Pleasure.